I never meant to look, but when she caught me, I didn't look away. It was early evening when I found myself standing on Daniel's porch, one hand buried in my jacket pocket, the other balancing a paper bag of notes, and a flash drive he'd asked me to drop off. The rain had just begun, a gentle drizzle that darkened the edges of the stone steps and carried the smell of wet leaves through the cool air. I had planned to hand over the things and head straight home. Quick. Simple. The door swung open sooner than I expected, and there she was, Elena, Daniel's mother. She was dressed casually, a soft gray cardigan over a fitted black top, her hair damp at the ends as if she'd only just come out of a shower. There was a calm composure to her, the kind that made the room behind her feel instantly warmer. "Daniel's running late again," she said with a small sigh, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "He texted me not 5 minutes ago. Something about traffic." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of their house wrapping around me, cinnamon tea, faint detergent, something floral and understated. "It's all right," I said, setting the bag on the counter. "I can wait a little, if that's okay." She smiled then, a polite but real sort of smile, and gestured toward the kitchen. "Of course. Come in. You look like you've been caught in the rain. Let me make you something warm. Tea? Coffee?" "Tea's fine," I replied, watching her move around the kitchen with quiet efficiency. There was something unhurried about her, the way she reached for the kettle, how her fingers wrapped around the handle of a worn ceramic mug. The rain began to patter more insistently against the window. I stood near the table, hands shoved in my pockets, letting my eyes trace the soft glow of the under-cabinet lights, the faint steam rising from the kettle as it clicked. "You've been keeping busy with your courses?" she asked, breaking the soft hum of the moment. "Trying to," I said, and she turned slightly, leaning against the counter, the cardigan falling open just a little as she crossed her arms. "It's that point in the semester where everything feels like it's due yesterday." Her laugh was quiet, warm, the kind that makes you feel like the room's just shifted closer. I remember those days. Long nights, cold coffee, and a head full of plans you're not quite sure how to live up to yet. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's about right." For a moment, there was just the rain, the ticking clock, and the soft clink of her spoon against the mug. She handed it to me, fingers brushing mine, warm from the steam, and the scent of cinnamon drifted up with the rising curl of heat. And maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the faint way her sleeve brushed my arm as she reached past me to grab a towel, or the way her eyes met mine for a second longer than necessary, calm, searching, unreadable. But in that brief, simple moment, the evening didn't feel like a simple errand anymore. Daniel's delay stretched from minutes into something more indefinite. I checked my phone once, then set it back on the table. Elena noticed. "He tends to underestimate traffic, or overestimate how fast time moves," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she stirred her tea. "It's a family trait, I suppose?" I gave a small chuckle. "I'm starting to think this wasn't just a quick drop-off after all." She gestured toward the chair across from hers. "Sit. There's no sense standing in the doorway like a guest in a museum." The chair was warmed from the nearby heater. The house had that quiet, lived-in feel, soft ticking clock, rain whispering against the glass, the faint hum of pipes hidden in the walls. She settled opposite me, her elbows resting lightly on the table, the sleeves of her cardigan bunched just above her wrists. "So," she began, "you're still studying graphic design, right?" I nodded. "Yeah. It's a bit of a balancing act, but I like it. There's something about creating something out of nothing that feels right." Her eyes softened at that, a kind of attention I didn't often see in people who were only asking out of politeness. "That's a good thing to hold on to," she said quietly. "Finding what feels right. Most people skip that step." There was a pause, not awkward, just reflective. She sipped her tea, then set it down, her fingers lingering on the ceramic. "And you?" I asked, more to return the interest than out of habit. "How's everything for you these days?" The way she exhaled before answering told me her life wasn't made of quick, simple answers. "Oh, busy. Different. She looked toward the window, where the rain traced slow paths down the glass. This house used to be much louder. Now it's just quiet. You start learning how to fill the silence, or how to make peace with it. There was a weight in those words, not heavy enough to dim her presence, but enough to make me want to stay a little longer than planned. I guess quiet can be nice sometimes, I said. Other times, not so much. Her smile returned, gentler this time. Exactly. A drip of water slipped from my jacket onto the floor, and I bent to wipe it with my sleeve, but she stopped me with a soft touch to my shoulder. Don't. I'll get a towel. She brushed past me to the counter, just a step, a breath, but enough for her perfume to reach me, warm and understated, like something faintly floral after rain. I caught the curve of her hand as she leaned, the way her bracelet shifted against her wrist. Here, she said, handing me the towel, her fingers almost brushing mine again. It was small moments like that, quiet, unforced, that began to gather in the air between us. Nothing said, nothing promised, just the simple awareness of another person's nearness when the house had every reason to feel empty. The rain hadn't let up. In fact, it had deepened into that steady, unhurried kind of downpour that blurred the world outside the window. My jacket still clung to me damply, and a faint chill traced along my shoulders. You're going to catch a cold in that, Elena said, her voice carrying from the kitchen doorway. Come upstairs. I think Daniel left a few of his shirts in the guest room. You can borrow one. I hesitated, not out of shyness, but because it felt strangely intimate to wander the quiet upstairs halls of a house that wasn't really mine. Yet her tone was calm, matter-of-fact, as if lending warmth was simply something she did without thinking twice. The hallway light was dim, the carpet soft under my socks. She opened a door with a practiced motion and stepped inside first, her presence framed by the warm lamp glow spilling across the floorboards. You can wait here, she said, glancing back over her shoulder. I'll see what I can find. From the hallway, I caught the faint rustle of drawers, the soft scrape of hangers. The door was half closed, a polite barrier, but not quite shut. I leaned against the wall, watching the light shift across the edge of the doorframe. And then, her voice, light, almost amused. Don't stare while I change. It should have ended there, a passing comment, a playful boundary. But something about the moment, the quiet rain, the warmth of the room, the calm ease in her tone, stirred something bold in me, something not reckless, but honest. Then, I said before I could second-guess it, change slower. There was a stillness after that. Not tense. Not angry. Just a pause, the kind that made the air feel heavier by a breath. Through the narrow gap, I saw the faint curve of her head turn slightly, as if registering the words not with offense, but with curiosity. A quiet exhale escaped her, not quite a laugh, but close. Is that how you talk to all women who offer you a dry shirt? Her voice was steady, faintly teasing, but laced with something unreadable. I cleared my throat, a faint heat rising to my face. Only the ones who say things like that first. The pause stretched another second, the sound of a hanger sliding free, the fabric of a shirt rustling. Then the door opened wider. She stepped out, the shirt draped over her arm, her expression calm but carrying that same quiet glint I couldn't place. Here, she said softly, placing it in my hands. Her fingers brushed my knuckles, just briefly. Try not to catch a cold. I nodded, the moment lingering in the space between us, not a confession, not even a real flirtation, just an awareness. Something that made the hallway feel smaller, warmer. Back downstairs, the living room felt different, though nothing in it had changed. The same amber lamp cast its soft glow over the shelves lined with framed photographs. The same rain tapped at the glass with quiet insistence. Yet there was a shift in the air, a thread I couldn't quite name but could feel tugging gently between us. Elena sat at the far end of the sofa, one leg folded beneath her, a blanket draped loosely over her lap. I settled at the opposite end, still feeling the faint warmth of the shirt she had handed me. It smelled faintly of laundry soap and something else, maybe her perfume lingering in the fabric. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, just stretched, like a held breath. She glanced at me then, eyes flicking briefly to the shirt I now wore. "Fits you better than it fits him," she said, her voice quiet, almost absent-minded, as though commenting on the weather. I gave a small smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." Her gaze lingered a heartbeat longer, then drifted toward the window. "Do people your age always tease like that?" she asked finally, not looking at me, but not entirely casual either. I felt my pulse quicken just enough to notice. "Sometimes," I said. "Depends on who we're teasing." This time, her eyes found mine. There was no irritation there, no sternness, only a calm kind of curiosity, as if she were trying to see the shape of the thought behind my words. The heater hummed softly. A clock ticked somewhere behind us. Her hand rested near the armrest, fingers lightly curled, only inches from mine. I noticed how her thumb traced an absent little arc against the fabric, how her breathing was steady but just a touch deeper than before. "I suppose," she said, voice even, "it's different when someone notices you. Really notices you. It's rare these days." There was a pause, long enough that I wondered if I should speak, or let the words rest where they fell. I chose the quieter route. "Some people deserve to be noticed," I said simply. The corner of her mouth lifted then, just slightly. Not a smile meant for politeness, something softer, harder to place. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving only the occasional patter of a droplet falling from the eaves. Inside, the air felt warm, close, not suffocating, but undeniably shared. She reached for her mug, fingers brushing the ceramic, and in that brief motion, her shoulders shifted just close enough for me to feel the faint heat radiating from her side of the sofa. Not touching, not quite, but close enough that the distance between us no longer felt like furniture. It wasn't a moment that asked for anything more. It was just the beginning of a quiet understanding that something had been said upstairs, and neither of us had really let it go. Back in the living room, the world felt strangely still. The rain had softened to a steady hush outside, a quiet backdrop against the faint hum of the heater. The same lamp glowed on the side table, the same framed photos of family gatherings lined the shelves, yet everything carried a faint charge now, as though the air had decided to hold its breath. Elena settled onto the sofa first, tucking her legs to the side, a blanket pulled lightly over her knees. I followed, taking the opposite end. The dry shirt she had found for me was still warm from her hands, carrying a faint trace of lavender detergent and something softer, a scent I couldn't quite name but was starting to recognize as hers. She reached for her mug, fingers curling around it with practiced ease, and glanced at me briefly. "Better?" she asked, meaning the shirt, the warmth, the small gesture that had already shifted the night into unfamiliar territory. "Much," I said. "Thanks again." A pause followed. It wasn't awkward, but it wasn't empty either. It was the kind of silence that stretched because either of us was in a hurry to break it. Finally, she spoke, her gaze drifting to the rain-slick window. "Do people your age always talk like that?" I looked up. "Like what?" "Like you did upstairs," she said, the corners of her mouth tugging faintly, not a reprimand, more like a question that wanted to see how far it could go. I felt a quiet rush of warmth in my chest, though I kept my tone even. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not with everyone." Her eyes met mine then, steady, curious, unreadable. She didn't look away right away. Instead, she studied me for a second longer than politeness required, as if measuring whether to press further or let it drift back into the night. "That kind of boldness," she said finally, "can be dangerous." "Only if it's not meant," I replied. She gave a soft sound that could have been a laugh or just an exhale. Dangerous words from someone still figuring the world out. The blanket shifted slightly as she adjusted her position, her hand resting on the armrest between us, close, though not quite touching mine. I could feel the faint warmth of her presence in the narrow space that remained. For a while, we both listened, to the rain, to the quiet tick of a clock in the hallway, to the breath that neither of us seemed to want to break first. "It's been a while since someone noticed," she said quietly, almost to herself. Really noticed. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't overcomplicate it. Some people deserve to be noticed, I said. Her lips curved, just slightly, and the look she gave me wasn't about the shirt or the tea or the weather anymore. It was the look of someone remembering what it felt like to be seen, and perhaps, for the first time in a long while, not minding it. The rain had thinned into a mist by the time I realized how much the night had settled around us. The house felt smaller somehow, not cramped, but intimate, like the air had drawn in closer, the edges softened by low light and shared warmth. Elena rose to refill the teapot, her steps unhurried, and when she returned, she sat beside me this time, not far, just close enough that the blanket brushed my leg when she adjusted it. You know, she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Nights like this used to be loud. Daniel and his friends running through the halls, my husband still home from work by now. There was always someone asking for something, dinner, help with homework, the car keys. Her voice carried no bitterness, only the faint ache of memory that comes with change. And now? I asked, leaning slightly forward, elbows on my knees. No, she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's mostly quiet. I tell myself it's peaceful, but sometimes peaceful is just another word for empty. I didn't speak right away. There are some truths you don't rush to fill with words. Instead, I let the silence stretch, warm and real. You've been carrying a lot, I said finally. It shows in the way you breathe between sentences. Her eyes flicked toward me, a little surprised, a little caught. You notice that? I notice more than I say, I replied, offering the faintest of smiles. She set her cup down slowly, turning it with her fingertips as though the motion steadied her thoughts. I thought by this age I'd have figured out how to rebuild, she murmured. But sometimes, rebuilding feels like starting from scratch. And some days, she trailed off, then gave a light laugh. Some days you just make tea and pretend it's enough. There was no grand gesture in that moment, no dramatic shift. Just a quiet truth, placed carefully between us like a fragile thing. Without thinking too much, I let my hand rest gently on the table beside hers, not touching, but near enough that if she wanted, she could close that space. She did. Slowly, deliberately, her fingers slid across the table, brushing mine in a way that was neither accidental nor rushed. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even an invitation. It was a thank you, silent, steady, almost weightless. That's the thing about empty spaces, I said quietly. Sometimes they're just waiting to be filled, not all at once, just slowly. Her breath caught, faintly, and then eased out with a small, almost invisible nod. Outside, a car passed, sending ripples through the wet street. Inside, the house felt a little less empty than it had a moment before. The night had stretched far longer than either of us expected. The rain had eased into a damp stillness outside, the streetlights casting soft halos on the wet pavement. My phone buzzed at last, a message from Daniel, short and unsurprising. Staying out. Don't wait up. I tucked it away, unsure how I felt about the relief that settled in my chest. Part of me had come here for him. Another part knew the evening had become something entirely different. I should probably head out, I said, rising slowly from the sofa. Elena followed suit, folding the blanket over the backrest. Of course, she said, her tone light but her eyes carrying that faint delay, the kind that doesn't want to rush the ending of a moment. At the door, I slipped into my damp jacket. The house was quiet around us, even the clock seemed to hold its tick. She stood a step away, her hand resting against the doorframe, fingertips tracing the grain of the wood absent-mindedly. You didn't have to stay this long, she murmured. I didn't mind, I said. It's been nice. More than nice, actually. Her eyes lifted to mine at that, and for a heartbeat, neither of us looked away. There was no dramatic music, no scripted cue, just the simple awareness of two people caught in the narrow space between what they should do and what they wanted to linger in a little longer. You're kind, she said quietly, and a little reckless with your words. I smiled faintly. Sometimes recklessness is just honesty with no place to go. The corner of her mouth curved, that same restrained almost smile she had given me earlier, the one that felt like a secret she hadn't decided to share yet. I shifted slightly, close enough now that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from her shoulder. Not touching, but nearly. My hand brushed the edge of the door as I reached for the handle, and hers stayed there, just a few inches away, her fingers curling lightly as if aware of the space. "You should come by again," she said. "Next time when Daniel's actually home." The words were simple, perfectly polite, but her eyes betrayed something quieter, something unspoken that lived in the pause between each syllable. "Maybe I will," I said. The night air slipped in when the door opened, cool and damp against my face. I stepped out slowly, but didn't leave right away. She lingered there, framed by the soft glow of the hallway light, one hand still against the frame, her thumb tracing that same absent little arc in the wood. "Good night," she said finally. "Good night, Elena." And then the door closed, gently, without haste, leaving me on the porch with rain-slick steps and a heart that felt warmer than it had when I arrived out a week past before I found myself on that porch again. This time, the air was dry, the pavement still carrying the faint scent of last night's rain. The paper bag in my hand was lighter, just a book Daniel had asked to borrow, but the weight I felt was something else entirely, the echo of an evening that had lingered longer than expected. When the door opened, it was different from last time. The house was alive with faint movement, the low murmur of a television from the living room, the clatter of something in the kitchen. Daniel was home, lounging on the sofa with a half-finished sandwich in his hand. "Hey, man! Took you long enough," he said with a grin, barely looking up from the screen. I handed him the book, exchanged a few casual words, but my eyes drifted, just for a moment, toward the kitchen. Elena emerged, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her hair was tied loosely, a soft blue blouse framing her shoulders, and there it was again, that calm composure, that quiet steadiness that seemed to draw a room into focus without trying. "You came," she said with a small, knowing smile. "I did," I replied, keeping my tone light, though the memory of that last night's doorway pause flickered somewhere beneath it. She set a tray on the table, tea, a plate of biscuits, the faint curl of steam carrying the same cinnamon warmth I remembered. "Stay a while," she said. "Properly this time. No rain, no missing sun, no rushed goodbyes." Daniel grunted something about heading upstairs in a bit to play his game. The house, though technically full, began to settle again into that familiar, warm quiet. I sat at the table, the mug warming my hands. She moved easily now, no distance, no tension, just a soft thread of something acknowledged but unspoken. Her fingers brushed mine as she passed the plate. This time, either of us pulled away quickly. "How's the shirt?" she asked lightly. I smiled. "Comfortable. I'm thinking of keeping it as a trophy." She gave a quiet laugh, a real one this time, not the guarded kind. Bold as ever. There was no need to name what had happened a week ago. It was there in the ease between our words, in the faint look that lingered a second too long, in the warmth that lived in the space of something slowly beginning rather than quickly taken. Daniel called from the hallway, asking if I'd be around next weekend. Elena glanced my way, a faint arch in her brow. "If you want to," she said. "There's always tea here." I held her gaze a moment longer than politeness required and nodded. "I'd like that." As I left that evening, the air was cool and still, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt like a door left ajar, not an invitation to cross recklessly, but to return when the time was right.